It's like we just started. Nothing counts until I actually hit the record button. That's kind of how this works.
I personally love it when technology immediately functions and we never have it. Like the fact that we can pull together, our conversation into one space across, like multiple edges of a continent, with zero technological issues. Ignore the chat. Is fantastic.
I mean, that's what I've said before. Bardic Lydia, apparently I like women and Werewolf the Apocalypse. Are those the only two things that I like? Because that would be disappointing, I think.
That's what you put on your character sheet, so...
Yeah, that's it. Really bare.
Yeah.
But hey, you know what? You have a drive, you have a purpose, and it's pretty simple.
Yeah, I like two things.
Intimacies, they're both major.
And women werewolves, look out.
Oh boy, they're in trouble. They're in absolute trouble. As indicated here, Zenrobo asks, "Do I like women and Werewolf the Apocalypse?" Apparently so. I am joined today by two people who are experts in a particular field of roleplay, which I think is kind of an important one for the discussion that we're going to be having today, or at least the discussion that's going to kick us off. I have eiragwen and Splooie here.
Yay!
Hello.
Now, in terms of the kinds of roleplay that the two of you have engaged in, both in the past and perhaps the present, why are you here? What are you experts in?
Gwen.
Splooie, do you want to?
Oh, wow, look at that. See how we're
you answer. I'm going to throw
other.
you right under the bus immediately.
Let's see. All aspects roleplay. Well, I have more of a familiarity with the genre of roleplay that includes. I was a viewer mostly of Arma 3 modded servers. I was a player and on staff for a server that involved Ark. I have watched DayZ servers. I've been on Red Dead Redemption servers and mostly on GTA 5 modded servers. But obviously D&D and
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's kind of my main passions currently are the D&D groups that I'm in and GTA mostly with a dabble of Red Dead Redemption.
Mm-hmm. And then my role play history. I mean, if you really want to start, it was when I was I had notebooks that I traded back and forth with my friend when I was a kid, and I had some characters that I wrote lines for, and she had characters that she wrote lines for. And weirdly, they were often set where you might find a Michael Crichton novel set. We were strange children. And then I got into tabletop roleplay and D&D, and then needed more of a fix and kind of touching into a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. Got involved with initially as a player and then eventually as an admin for a 24/7 multi-splat World of Darkness chat setting, which is Wanton Wicked. And then my friend started playing GTA roleplay, and I was like, that's weird and silly. I'm never going to do that. And now I play it a whole bunch, and I do Red Dead. I play a cowboy occasionally.
Now, my experience with all of this can be traced to one Twitch clip in which I brutally murder somebody who's just trying to help. Although I don't actually murder somebody. I just choke them out. And who is that? Who did I choke out there?
I'm positive that I have that featured as a clip on my Twitch.
Yeah, it was definitely Gwen that you choked out, and I have seen that clip probably a dozen times, and I laugh every single time, especially because your reaction is like, oh, and I can just know you're dying on a muted mic. Just, oh, it's so funny.
Yeah, I in fact did it twice.
Yeah. Link in the chat.
Yeah.
Very good.
So that's my some contribution to all of this. But the topic that we're going to be discussing today, I've kind of dubbed an immersive RPG. And the reason why I'm calling it that, and you two can tell me whether or not this is accurate, is that these are role-playing games that, first of all, are available anytime. You can hop in and the server is going to be running, and there more often than not will be people playing. But also that it asks you to not just create a role-playing character, but to almost even create another life for you to play in. A life that you get to put forward in a server. Now, in GTA, that's set in modern day. In Red Dead Redemption, that would be set, back in the times of the Wild West. But at the same time, it is something that is different than, say, sitting down at a tabletop role-playing game, or even an online tabletop role-playing game, or even, one would say, a LARP, because those have defined starts and ends, and this kind of game does not.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's for the most part, what people choose to play on are allow listed servers. So, you send an application in, staff reviews it, they'll approve you whether or not you have access to those servers. But yes, at that point, it is a literal 24/7 active running server spanning all time zones, mostly cut down to like NA, EU, AU for Australia. And it's a 24/7 do what you want sandbox RP experience.
Yeah, and so in terms of referring to it as an immersive role-play game, I think that that's a pretty apt term, because since you are just jumping in and there's no storyteller like you might experience in a LARP or on tabletop, it's just people inhabiting characters. It's pure improv constantly. Like there may be events that get run that sort of coax people in a particular direction if they choose to participate in it, but it's otherwise just a pure experience in player-to-player trust that, as I'm sure we'll cover, is betrayed sometimes frequently. But that's kind of what you're signing yourself up for. Is just like you're kind of just throwing yourself out there and seeing what you get back out of it.
And we actually started talking about this a couple of weeks ago, which was when I kind of there was some questions surrounding in the community as well of the concept of when people are playing in a game, it can have an effect on your real life. But it reminded me of when I was participating in these kinds of games. Now, I never did in the context of a 3D realized world, right? One of the first ones, for instance, Second Life, was famous for quite some time. For me, it was always chat-based games, but they were chat-based games that ran for 24 hours a day, that you could log on and you could anticipate seeing somebody who's going to be there, and you would create a character that would essentially be a second life for you at that point. And I remember just how thrilling those could be and just how fun they could be. And I also remember getting wrecked by them.
Yeah, it is one of the most addicting forms of role play. That could be a good thing, but also lead you down the path to troubling waters and destruction of, like you said, your mental state, your physical well-being, because it's 24/7, and because you are so invested in being online, you tend to forget the hours that you've spent doing it because you're having so much fun. Even when you're not having so much fun, it's hard to just click the log out button because you just are so invested. And the immersion is so addicting. You can't get off in fear of missing out.
Yeah, there's a certain element of probably like impacting the same things that get hit like when you're playing an MMO that isn't role play, but that is like a persistent world that's ongoing. I know there's been a couple of times where I've stopped multiple times to cook and feed my character in these games, and then stopped playing and like realized, oh, I forgot to eat dinner, like for me, the player. So yeah, it can really get you sucked in. And yeah, what I think 100% the thing that's really nice about it is, and I think a lot of people have experienced if they're in a regular, semi-regular tabletop game, or even like a one-shot, at the end of it, you're just like, ugh, I want to do it again. I just had so much fun playing pretend and being some other fantastical version of my personality for a little while, and now I have to wait until next week or the next time we can schedule something. And the nice thing and the somewhat destructive thing about these immersive games is that you can just log in again in an hour if you get the time to do it, or the very next day, or or just keep playing. The only person that really has to tell you that you need to stop is you.
But do you tell yourself to stop?
Well, that's there's okay, and there needs to be a distinction, because yes, like speaking for myself, for the most part, I could probably count on just one hand, and I don't even need all the fingers, of how many times I didn't tell myself to stop, because I have a good understanding. I don't have an addictive personality anyways, thankfully.
I do.
Yeah, yes, she does. But I understand where my line is when it comes to being online on a server, and I adhere to it very strictly. And I know exactly when, I have a job, and I know exactly when I need to go to bed. I might fudge with it every 30 minutes or so, but man, it is a hard out. I'm gone, and that's that. And that's where the problem lies with some people who do have a job, and they do have a life, and they have responsibilities in the real world, but they have a problem with telling themselves no, or that's enough, or I need to step back, because it's becoming overbearing or too powerful. And yeah, that's where it can kind of turn into the destructive aspect of that kind of role play.
So you're talking about, you mentioned now twice the concept of addictive. And addictive is one of those things, kind of like, I've seen people describe themselves as OCD or obsessive compulsive.
Right.
And there's obsessive compulsive, which is the, popular term of, oh, I'm just fastidious. And then there's actual obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
Do you think this is actually addictive?
You know what? I think the last time I understood a definition of addictive is when there is a compulsion to interact that is harmful to other aspects of your life. And from that perspective, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's addictive to everybody,
right?
But I do think it has addictive qualities, because when it comes down to it, this is how I always describe it, is it's a bunch of adults that are choosing to play Barbies with each other. Like, they're engaging in the most like childlike portion of their brain, and like delving into this escapism. And also, in particular for GTA Online and Red Dead Online roleplay places, they're very realistic. And so it can feel like, aha, here I can pick out exactly how I wish that I looked and make a cooler version of myself and interact in a world that feels very complete and that I feel like I can contribute to, that I get the same types of emotions as I would do from the real world, because I can get really happy about things and I can get incredibly frustrated with things. And in the back of my head, I know I can just turn it off. And so it doesn't super affect me. Like, it might make me feel the same emotions that I would in real life, but I know that it's a fake thing. And therefore, it's quote unquote safe for me to keep indulging in it, because although I have not yet turned it off, I know that I could at any time, right? I can set down the keyboard at any time that I want to. I just don't want to right now because I'm having fun. And have definitely met people like that and interacted with people that have found that to be how they're interacting with the game. I don't find myself in that shoes. Like, if I take a vacation from work where I don't have to do anything and I haven't made other plans, would I absolutely jump into the game and just like go nuts because I don't normally get to go nuts and stay up until 3 a.m. playing a character or whatever? Probably, but that's the same way I would feel about, jumping into, playing Cyberpunk like Liz and Scott were just playing, and being able to like play that game a whole bunch because I don't get the time to just dedicate, hours and hours and hours to it, typically during the week.
Yeah, or doing a Lord of the Rings marathon. But it's because in that instance, it's giving me pleasure. I enjoy doing those things because at the end, I'm going to feel great. And that's, you mentioned the Second Life and the realism of these games. That's kind of where the addiction is rooted in. It's the ability to control that life, the character that you've created and you're invested in, and that you have a backstory that you've created. You have all these aspirations and goals for this person, and you may not have those same types of control for the real life, and so the escapism becomes addictive because you have control to a point, but you have more control, at least in these kinds of characters in role play, than you would in real life.
So I just, out of curiosity, I looked up addiction on Wikipedia just for the exact definition of it. Now, of course, this is Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not a doctor, et cetera, et cetera. But addiction is a neuropsychological disorder characterized by a persistent and intense urge to use a drug or engage in a behavior that produces natural reward despite substantial harm and other negative consequences.
Boy.
I was really close.
And I mean, I think that one of the things about immersive RPGs that is different from other RPGs is that it's so easy to get the hit.
Yep.
Right? There's drug-seeking behavior if you're addicted. There's role-playing seeking behavior, I think. And just like how there are people out there who they can try cocaine or alcohol or meth once or twice and be like, all right, well, maybe even they enjoyed it, but they don't need to go again.
Right.
And there are some people for whom, you take a couple of hits and then that's it. It has rewired your brain. If I'm not really addicted to tabletop role playing, in that there isn't a point where I'm sitting alone at home and thinking, God, I really want to get a group together. And then I, wander out of the house and I find 3 strangers and I say, okay, sit in front of me, make a character. Okay, roll these dice. I don't do that.
Right.
But in an immersive RPG, that hit is always close.
Yep. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, go ahead.
And if that's the case, can it be dangerous? Have you seen it be dangerous?
Yes.
Yeah.
Without naming names, obviously, we've seen instances where it has resulted in not taking care of their bodies physically, and not just on the aspect of like not enough sleep. That's like the most frequent. That's number one. But obviously not eating, as Gwen mentioned, but like calling in for work the next day, and not
Hygiene going away.
hygiene, not taking showers, and not cleaning your room and the house and whatever. And it becomes overwhelming in the real life because those things have become out of control again. And not even just that, but things that happen on the server that make you feel bad, an interaction that might have turned toxic, or something that's not quite working out that you had planned, but it's just not working, and you're mentally getting fatigue and drain and anxiety, and yet you just can't stop. You go back in after you take a little break, or you have a giant explosion of emotion and say, I'm never going to do this again, and scream, and vent. And then 5 hours later, you're right back at it. And we're sitting here going, well, what was all of that you said before? And so, yeah, it could be bad. It can get bad.
I'm actually I'm going to flag something here. I'm just going to pop up a pause card here because people are mentioning some of these things in chat. One of these things is, I am not a doctor. I am willing to bet a lot of money that neither eiragwen nor Splooie are also willing to act as to present themselves as doctors providing a professional opinion. So in terms of people who have real world neurological disorders, or even just atypical neurological conditions, we're not making any kind of specific claims about those.
Right.
So if you say, like, for instance, Requiem said, from personal experience, someone with ADHD can quickly become addicted to these types of games, perhaps, but I don't know, because I can't make that kind of claim. But not to invalidate your own experience.
Yeah.
And I would say, just, for that, for the sake of our discussion with this, although, I can describe, and Splooie has just described, things that I think would definitively fit addicted. We're just using it in a colloquial sense as opposed to a clinical sense.
Absolutely.
Because it's just based on our observations, and that's not, that's not complete information that we've got. But, from my own personal experience, and this is kind of just like a little bit more of like an extension of the yellow card, I think. I've had really bad experiences on GTA roleplay that I'm still like, I feel like whiplash from those, even though it's been more than a year at this point since the last big one that was just like truly an upsetting thing. And it was just, it came down to the feeling of just being really let down by people that I had trusted to play the game with me. And they just did not continue to be trustworthy to play the game with, and I'll leave it at that. But when I encounter them again, even though I'm not interacting, like, I just recognize their character, like, I immediately feel that sense of broken trust and being very uncomfortable, and then just like needing to leave the area so that I don't have to hear their voice or see their character or anything like that. And so even though I'm still continuing to play this particular game, I know that there's parts of it that have affected me pretty negatively, to where like how I play the game gets impacted because of just a bad experience in the past. So the other thing I want to say, though, is this can be a very fun hobby, and not everybody is having the same, terrible thing. And like right now, I have a couple of characters. I found that, when I was only playing a singular character, I got very invested in that one, and I like serious role play typically. Like I like to do goofy stuff as well, but I like serious role play. And if I have a single serious character, it was really easy to get like overly invested in whether or not they were successful. And so now I have kind of two casual characters. One, I'm kind of interested in like getting into law. And then like what I would consider right now my main character is what's sort of referred to as a shitbird, where she's just like so useless. She kind of talks like how Liz does Nancy Drew. I stole the voice from my Vishara character when we were playing D&D. And so she's just kind of like a nonsensical character in a world that's just like a little bit hyper realistic. And I have the most fun with her because I truly do not expect any consequences to ever actually matter to her. And therefore, I'm not finding that I have to like extend out a whole bunch of trust other than that Splooie is forced to play with me.
Yeah, it's in all this like stuff that we've said so far, and we'll probably get more into other things that could potentially be negative, but that's to say that like some of the best role play experiences I've had is in this genre. It's hands down can be some of the most, and because of the immersion, because of the realism, some of the most impactful and emotional and memorable experiences that I've had in roleplay. And especially when everyone is just clicking and you all have this weird telepathic agreement of the give and take, and we're all safe in this one moment, and we're just having a great scene, and no one's stepping on each other's toes to take the spotlight. And that absolutely can happen and does happen every single day. But it's just more of like a cautionary tale that this can also be really where you don't have the storyteller or the game master or the dungeon master to kind of steer everything through and have that ability to say, okay, let's pull it back and let's stop for a second or have a conversation. You cannot do that on the server. In fact, it's a strict rule that everything that happens on the server stays in character, and nothing out of character can be brought in. So if you have a problem, you literally just hit the ejector button. You just kind of you can go F8 quit, and that's essentially the command you type in, and you just log off the server. But you kind of have to have that ability to say, this is my line.
Right.
Yeah, you have to be your own safety mechanism for sure. Or find people that you're playing with that are going to also act as your safety mechanism that you know you can trust. Like Blue is my safety mechanism in the game. And then I have some other friends that I'm just very, very close to that are also my safety mechanism. And then I act as the same for them. But I don't trust just the broad community to be a safety mechanism because there's a very broad experience and background of what is fun and acceptable and interesting because we're playing with people from literally all over the world. Like the number of like amazing, interesting accents that I've heard on these servers is really exciting. To know that I'm talking to people from, potentially just anywhere. But my experience as somebody on the west coast of the United States isn't even going to be the same experience as somebody who's on the east coast of the United States, let alone the west coast of a whole completely different continent. And so therefore, like the lines that I've established for myself as a person may not be the same as the lines that I'm interacting with. So I just can't, it's unrealistic for me to expect the other people that aren't very close to me to keep my safety in mind because they just don't know how to do that. They don't have that experience with me, and I don't have the same for them. So it's kind of the big caveat to all of this is that you have to know what your limits are, and if you can do that, then it's a super amount of fun. I
do appreciate that both of you kind of have to go and defend this sort of thing, we sort of started this by being like, so have you ever experienced addiction when it comes to role playing in these awful places that no one should ever visit? No, it's role playing, and role playing is a lot of fun. And one of the things that I think that we do have to acknowledge here is that a lot of these places have been around for a long time. And this is before things like safety and role playing were brought up as a specific thing that role playing games need to have. And there is a certain amount of we're letting people do this sort of thing, and we're not going to moderate it. And we're relying on players to kind of not be dicks, and that is not a dereliction of duty. That is a mindset that has become less popular based on the focus on things like safety that have been coming up in the past sort of decade of things. Also, I know people who have role-played cars, Bardic Lydia. Literally. Now, but I also remember, from my own examples, I remember being 14 and racing home so that I could connect to the internet using dial-up so that I could role play in some of these servers, that my characters would have crushes and and be trying to romance other characters, and that I would be thinking all day about, like, what can I tell this other character to get them to like me, and what can I do in order to resolve this particular problem that's been plaguing the community. And I should have been paying attention to other things, but no. And I would go home, and the thing is, because it was dial-up internet, obviously, then if I'm using it, no one else is using it, and no one else is using the phone, and nobody can call in. And I'm not saying that this was, the worst thing that happens in the world, but it absolutely was, to a certain degree, me being desperate to just dive back into the world for just a little longer.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that is a positive and also can, when it is a negative, sort of mask that negativity, is that it is social. And especially as gamers, one of the biggest criticisms that people grow up with, especially if it's like a pre-Twitch existence, where people were able to share their gameplay with other people, is that they're loners and they're isolated and they stay hunkered down in basements away from the light. And that may be true for some of us, but it's fine. But when you're playing a game that has you actually literally speaking to other people using a microphone and hearing their voices back to you, there is a sense of you are being social. You are needing to react to them, even though you're not straight face to face with them. You are reacting to what you can perceive of their emotions and their what they're sort of throwing out into the world that you're then reacting to. And so it is something that's highly nerdy, but also, kind of contradictory of one of the stereotypes of being a gaming nerd. But that can also, I think, like I said, be something that sort of masks some of the flaws. Because if you're just like, well, I'm going online and I'm hanging out with my friends and they truly are my friends, even if they're not in my touchable space, then you will put up with some of the other stuff that might be negative that goes along with it.
Would you rather they be in your touchable space at that point?
Well, some of them.
So,
yeah.
So the reason why I'm asking that way, and this was a kind of a gotcha question here. The reason why I ask that way is that we have this kind of, how do I put this? We have a a thought that, okay, well, I might not be going outside, but I am being social. I'm being social online. You are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That's exactly no. Yeah, go ahead.
no, here I want to see if you've got the same sort of thought that I do.
Oh, me? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
So it's funny because like as she was speaking, I was thinking the same thing. It's kind of a reverse reality, like where you kind of are you feel alone in your real life, and therefore it's easy to be social in a video game, or maybe you have an awkwardness of meeting actual friends or something, and so that connection that you can make online becomes something that you crave or that you need, because it's a little easier to talk to somebody when you're not actually face to face, and you're not getting sort of maybe a visual cue of rejection, or they can't just walk away from you. I mean, kind of they can in the game in this instance, but the social aspect of it is sort of ingrained in this role play, because you're kind of all in the same space. And really the only way that you can avoid that person at times is just to not log into the server. But there is that aspect of wanting that connection, that human connection, through the roleplay servers that it's just, people crave it. It's easy.
What I find is the notion that you are being social with other people online is true, but the notion that it is the same skill set and etiquette and social rules as being in person with somebody is incorrect. And that's where I think a lot of people run into some problems, that they're like, well, these are my friends. And then you want to go and visit your friends, but you do not have an in-person relationship with them. That doesn't mean that you can't create one. That doesn't mean that you can't meet somebody in real life after you've met them on the internet, and you can pick right up where it was before. I have friends who I have successfully bridged that gap from online only to in-person friend. But that also implies a certain amount of social skill and emotional adaptability that is not a given. Right. And so when you're playing in an immersive role-playing game, that's an even deeper subset. That's a different social contract that you've entered into everybody, because you know that the game isn't real life. If I choke out eiragwen because I accidentally pressed the wrong button, I'm not going to get hogtied for it. If I accidentally choke somebody in Wait. But if I accidentally choke somebody in real life, there's a problem.
Yeah, huge one. Yeah, exactly.
And so
it's so interesting, that contract thing you talked about.
Because there is a contract within the game, but the problem is also that contract really prevents people from being able to have a manner of recourse. If I'm a dick to you in game, then I can always claim that it's because it was a game.
Yes.
Do you find that you run into those sorts of people still?
Yes. But I'm also going to yank this into a tangent, because it's semi-related to what's going on, but it's just a little bit askew. Okay, so one of the things that's true on almost every server, at least all the ones that I've played on, is that if your character becomes incapacitated because they've been shot, even if somebody walks up to them and then just completely unloads their weapon into the skull of your character, you get to choose whether or not you die. And that can be sometimes a little bit frustrating. Like, say you're role playing out a war between two rival gangs or something, and you have this scene, you say the coolest lines ever, you shoot the leader of their gang, and then the very next day you see them driving around and you're just like, it feels a little bit less impactful because they didn't actually go down. But it's also it's part of playing the game. You can't decide if somebody else gets rid of their character, and when they do decide to get rid of your character, it can be super meaningful. But the tangent that I was thinking of is there's certain servers, a lot of servers are really reliant on cops versus bad guys roleplay, where there's players that are playing the cop faction and then there's all of the criminal element. And the cops jokingly are referred to as the biggest gang on those servers because they're all acting in a way where they want as a whole, a unit, to be successful. And so one of the things that they do to kind of power game that a little bit is if there's an officer involved shooting and an officer goes down, one of the things they like to do is do a emote that they've no pulsed, that the pulse has gone from their character, but then they get resuscitated later at the hospital in order to drive up the charges against the people that shot them. It's perfect example of power gaming in the server, but it reminded me of that thing where it's just like, you kind of want to have this impact on people, and you aren't guaranteed that impact on people, but some people have tools at hand where they're just like, well, I'm not going to be able to get, I didn't shoot you down, but man, you're going to spend a little bit more time in fake timeout because of the fact that I hit a no pulse on this real temporary. And when people do that, everyone goes, oh, they're clearly driving up charges. Like there's no, at this point, it's so common that it's not even there's no tenseness to it. Like, oh, they might.
No, you just roll your
go.
eyes.
You just go,
You're like, okay, whatever. Yeah, it's a vindictive aspect to that. It's the oh, you think you got me? Well, I'm gonna get you. Yeah, it's a competition, and you're right. That's where the line blurs between are you actually role playing what your character would say or do or act like, or are you just using that as an excuse to be a dick? And like I saw in the chat, it's 100%. I'm just playing my character. So because there's no argument back at that, it's the ultimate trump card where it's just, well, what can you say? I'm playing my character, and I don't know. I'm just this is a roleplay server, and I'm just trying to roleplay. Aren't you trying to roleplay? It's like, well, yes, but your roleplay requires me to be underneath the boot, and there's absolutely no collaboration, and both people aren't having a good time. And that's, like you said, where the asshole dick can take advantage of, especially if they're a seasoned role player, take advantage of the excuse of, well, it's just role play. And we see it all the time. It's a problem.
But yeah, that's where clearly you can't just completely fake something in order to get somebody into trouble, or you shouldn't. I mean, it's illegal for you to do that in real life. So to go back a couple of topics, the social is a different type of social. The consequences of this social that's online is very different from having these same friends in a touchable space.
Requiem Lost asks, in these games you are a part of, are there measures of protection against power or god gamers?
So
yes.
So at its base level, yes. In what's the word I'm looking for? Not performance, or in practice. That's it. In practice, no, not all the time. That's because you introduce the human element of it, and in more of a detail, it's more of so there's a staff. Obviously, all these servers have staffs. And there's the owners, the admins, moderators. Some are strictly in charge of the Discord channels that are active with the community, and then there are others that review tickets or reports from players. Where in this instance, if we're talking about power gaming, that ticket would be filed, hopefully, by the person that feels like there's an issue. The staff would take care of it, and then there might be some punishment that's doled out that requires maybe a temporary ban or adjustment of role play, or maybe even a permanent ban. The issue that we see a lot is that the human aspect is that those staff members might be friends with the people that are being accused of breaking the rules, and then
or the person that's being harmed by the power gaming is just like I don't want to cause it, I don't want to cause trouble, so
Yeah.
I'll just let it go.
Right.
That sort of thing.
The emotions play into it, and then the consequence of that action isn't a stamp. It's straight off the board. Whatever situation that involves that kind of thing, this is how it's going to be doled out. It's like no ifs, ands, or buts. It's just not going to happen, and that's kind of where confusion lies, and people get upset that well, why is it in that instance it was not okay, but in this instance it is, and I'm way more connected to this instance because that's my friend or that's me or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a yes and no.
But in nearly all cases, you can just log out. There might be a consequence where you have to explain why you logged out if somebody puts in a complaint about you doing that. But you always have the option to just say nope and nope out of there. Or if you don't want to go to the extreme of logging out, if something gets presented to you that you just simply don't want to have as part of the story, you can just say no and ignore it or walk away, or just like redirect to something else and then just not acknowledge that particular thing. And that can come up because I don't know, somebody like leaps onto the scene in the middle of a conversation that you're having and declares that they're opening up a demonic portal into another space, and you're just like, well, I don't know what's going on with that person. Maybe they've had too much caffeine.
Not in my eyes.
That's odd. I don't see it. And just continue with what you're doing. Or if it's something that's just like more aggressive, maybe you just say like, I'm not interested, and then go away. So it is kind of the thing where you have to, again, be your own moderator in terms of what you want to be able to put up with. The situations where you may find yourself in frustration, you can't just walk away, is you got arrested and now you are in timeout, and the situation that put you into that was not something that you really wanted to. It was somebody just jumped out of the bushes and started a fight with you, and then the cops ended up arresting you because they couldn't find the other person.
Classic.
You know, so that's a thing where you can't just walk away. You do have to sort of put up with it, but it's. I would also say that, like, even though you did get like gamed upon in that situation, it's so ingrained in what the expectation of gameplay is going to be like that even that timeout that you have to put up with that's really annoying is not so much that you're just like, that's it. This is it. This is my limit. It's just more like, I can't believe I got dragged into this. I was looking forward to doing something else.
I do want to touch upon a little bit this idea of there being a staff involved in this game. Mm-hmm. Do either of you have any experience along those lines?
Yes. Both of us.
And how do you feel about your time doing that?
For me, so I was a staff member for an ARC server. It was great. I was a staff member for a Red Dead server. It had its moments, and I was partly staff, kind of, sort of, for GTA. It's a mixed bag, and I think it's because of the evolution of the roleplay that I've experienced in all of those games, but especially GTA. So the ARC server specifically was great because it was a smaller server, smaller community, and so we were able to interact with players that wanted to be a part of the storylines that we were introducing into the server, and then kind of like letting them go on and interact with the like
little Easter eggs and the type of like, not necessarily on rails, but like we're steering them. We're kind of steering them in a way, but they were loving it, and it was just so great. Then we go into later on. This is like I think about a 2 to 3 year difference between then and when I did the Red Dead / GTA staff, and at that point, role play on those kinds of games had changed immensely, and in that aspect, I dealt with a lot of frustration, not only with just the player base and what they were doing and not understanding and the types of community that we were trying to build with those servers, but also with fellow staff. And like I had mentioned before, sort of the hypocrisy of, well, you're treating this group of players differently than you're treating these other group of players, and how is there a standard that's going to be set for all players if that's not being met just at its base level? And so I've said it many times to Gwen and other friends, I'm never going to be staff ever again because of those experiences. And it's unfortunate, but there were good things about staff that you could try and create that Gwen is probably about to speak to a lot better than me, because she was in a very unique position. But overall, those experiences just left a very bad taste in my mouth that's honestly affected how I am as a player on these servers and my outlook in a lot of these situations. And I mean, in this form of my life, I will admit I am a pessimist, because I like to tell Gwen I'm a realistic optimist, which is stupid. But like in this specific thing, I am an absolute pessimist when it comes to this role play. But yeah, I'll let Gwen speak now.
Yeah, I have also, I've staffed the 24/7 World of Darkness game, which was had a lot more storyteller elements to it as part of being staff, in addition to breaking up fights between players. And then I also was for a while one of the lead staff on a Red Dead server, and the outcome is also that I will never ever staff for a game again. And the reason behind both times that I joined staff is that I cared a lot about what was trying to get accomplished. In the case of Red Dead, like the second that I played the game, Red Dead Redemption 2, I wanted to be able to role play in this. When I was like back in college and I took a game design class, like the game that I pitched was a Wild West MMO style game. So like that setting was one that I cared just so much about. And the game is really beautiful. And so I was just like, this is going to be the thing. It's also going to be like a slower storytelling pace than GTA. And so it's not going to be this thing where people need to be online constantly, that you can have a story stretch out a couple of days and not have it feel like it's dragging, because you have to walk or ride a horse everywhere instead of driving a fast car. So I super cared about the setting. And what becomes very clear is that I was not getting paid to care about this, and nobody else on the staff was being paid to care about this. I was just volunteering my emotional capacity into it, and others were volunteering occasionally nothing at all other than their willingness to have a tag on their name that was staff, because they had other things that were going on. They had an intention when they joined staff, but not the ability to follow through, or they had an interest in having some power to shape what the server was going to be like, or the willingness to be helpful and not as much of an emotional investment as I was willing to put into it. And so it was all of these different things, and nobody was actually being held accountable for the time that they were being asked to put into it. And there certainly is not an ethics committee in a group of volunteers that are interacting online. And so it can become an incredibly frustrating experience to be a part of a group of people that are not being held to the same level of investment. Not even just like you have to get it done because you're getting paid to get it done, that you might experience at work where you have no emotional investment. You're just doing something to pay the rent.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's the case, it was just a lot of hard work, and it kind of came to a point where there was just 2 or 3 of us actually doing anything. And the whole reason Splooie got involved on that staff is because he was tired of seeing how overworked I was trying to hold things together. And he's just like, just let me get onto it. I'll just help out with the tickets. And the funny thing was, that's how I got roped into being on the staff. Is they said, we know you haven't wanted to be on a staff before, but all you have to do is just this little bit of it. And I was like, okay, I'll help out. And then, that's the thing that I do, is I get really emotionally invested in things and I can't let go until it gets really bad.
Sucker.
Yeah, exactly. That's 100% me. I do turn into a cartoon version of a sucker whenever I get invested in things like that. And eventually, like, it kind of got to the point where it was just like there was there was a straw that broke the camel's back, and I exited quickly. But it also kind of took some shine off, because having experienced helping out on a server with a lot of people and a lot of egos, it's really difficult for me to not see those things, in the staff of the servers that I play on, and where I can see what people are presenting to their public face and be like, you're somebody who's very invested emotionally. You're somebody who's doing it for the sake of their ego. You're somebody who's doing it just to get their friends there, and for popularity, and so it's just, it's kind of why I have also limited the amount of time that I play on these games and who I play with them, because I just don't want to get into a situation where I want to have to submit a ticket about something, and have to deal with the staff as much as whoever it is that I might want to file the ticket against.
It's really hard to believe the illusion when we've already seen behind the curtain, is really what it comes down to.
Yeah. And again, oh my gosh, please understand that a lot of our emotional fatigue is because we've done this for quite some time. And I think anybody who has played tabletop games will have war stories about things that were very frustrating, or they've heard their friends lament about, like, a weird person that was at their table one time that just was doing these bizarre things. I mean, there's YouTube channels that talk about that a lot. Or, when you have a job that you like but coworkers that you dislike, that, it's easy to point out the stuff that's kind of the negative in those war stories. But then, the fact that we're still engaging with this, that's just keep that in mind, that we still have fun with it, that it's still a fun game to play. And it's just, these are cautionary tales to kind of help sort of, if you're interested, frame how you might engage and set expectations.
So that's going to lead into the question that I was going to ask here. Okay. You still play in these games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know the toll that it takes on the staff.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you still play in these games?
Been asking me. I'm asking myself that question for a really long time. Again, it kind of goes back to that you're chasing that dragon, that high, that feeling of, like I said, some of the best experiences I've had in roleplay have been on these servers. The tension you can cut with the knife, the drama-filled back and forth, the hilarious stuff that happens in all video games, as we watched, maybe some of us did with Punchy and and the goofy driving that Liz did, like all of that exists in these in this type of role playing on these servers, and they're like Gwen said, there are way more of those instances than the negative ones that we've talked about. Even though sometimes those negative ones are so daunting and overwhelming at times, I have been able and this is me personally, I have been able to carve out exactly what I need out of these servers and this role play to know that I can 9 times out of 10 have an enjoyable experience when I'm on. But that's also because I'm not new and I don't have the blinders on. And so I can kind of navigate where I think I'm not going to have a good time, and I'm going to avoid that type of a route. But yeah, like I said, there's so much joy that I've had. All of my online friends, aside from this group from RPGClinic, have been because I've met them on these servers. All of them, Gwen included. And so,
you two are friends?
Yeah, who would have thought? It's I like to say more than friends, finger to cheek.
We are taking a cross-country road trip in 2 weeks, so we'll update you after that.
We'll see how it goes around Arizona, I guess.
The true test of a relationship is the Phoenix sun.
Yeah, exactly. When we're staring into the depths of the Grand Canyon, will it stare back at us? It's but yeah, it's those experiences that have allowed me to say, yeah, you know what, I talk crap about this a lot, and I have all these horror stories and scars, but hey, Gwen, you want to get on the server and be dumb? Like, that's kind of what it comes back to. Yeah.
So
it wouldn't matter if it didn't matter.
Perfect.
Is kind of what it comes down to. Like, and we've figured out, we didn't always have it figured out. I, in particular, did not always have it figured out. Like, probably the third time that I interacted with Splooie in the server, like, my character started crying and I started crying because there was a circumstance going on that she just didn't have any control over, and I didn't have any ideas of how I was going to approach it, and he was like the impact shield that received that. So like, it has not always been the case that I've been like, had this super mature outlook on things, but nowadays, I have figured out how to find enjoyment on being this gigantic, bizarrely dressed woman sitting in a court case whose best friend comes in, throws a Molotov cocktail at the judge, and then by the end of the open court, she's running for governor. Like, I've figured out how to like embrace the absurd that's in it and just roll with it. So, yeah, that's why I figured it out. I figured out how to play the game the way that makes me happy. And it's because I have friends that cared enough to say, well, maybe this isn't the fun way to play it for you. And when we do want to play the ultra serious character, I have people that are there as my backups, Splooie included, to kind of help, after we log out, kind of have like an aftercare session where I'm just like, hey, here's how I'm feeling after all of that. That was a weird session. It felt like it was a really heavy story that we were telling, or I wasn't able to get the point across. Did it feel like I was communicating what I wanted to say in that moment? And get feedback that, makes it so that way I'm just like, okay, cool. I've processed.
Osab brings up something here that I think it's reflective of the question that I was going to ask here. I imagine that there may be an element of trying to contribute positively so that the staff sees some positive from their efforts. And I mean, there's certainly an element of be the kind of player you want to see. Mm-hmm. And it's a gotcha question when I ask, like, okay, so if you hated being staff so much, why are you playing? Because there are clearly people out there who will be staff.
Right.
I think that it's the kind of job that wears on you, and that if you let it go for long enough, you definitely put yourself in danger of just throwing your hands up in the air and saying, like, I don't care anymore, or I don't have enough support, or it's too thankless, and you burn out of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because both of you have said, I will not be staff again. And
Oh, yeah.
I said this a very long time ago when I was a storyteller on a 24/7 server. Then I started another one. and that was with a community of people who essentially was closed. We did not advertise. We did not. The only people who could get onto that server, you had to know us, the RPGClinic community. You had to either be a part of it already, or you had to know somebody who was in it who invited you in. And it still took enough of a toll on me, even surrounded by people who are my friends, that I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And that's partially because when we started it, it was at the height of the pandemic. You couldn't do anything. You couldn't go anywhere. So there was some amount of that. But I think that there was also, towards the end, there were a couple of incidences of, like, you know, having to walk very delicately because of problems that came up on the server. But I think that there was also a certain element of, it's just a lot of work. Even if, you know, the tickets aren't so bad, even if it's just, you know, regular maintenance or day-to-day stuff, it's a lot of work and a lot of that work is something that the players never see.
Correct.
The conversations that you have with other staff members about, like, what do we do about this that happened, or what do we do about this story and trying to get it back on track, or even if you're not actively curating the narrative of the game, even just something as simple as, this person did this.
Right.
Is that okay? And maybe on the face of it, sure, but I would let eiragwen do this thing, but what if Splooie did this thing?
Right.
But then it's wrong for me to say that eiragwen can do it if Splooie, I don't want to do it. You know, and it gets to be so much that, because very, very few of these positions are paid.
Correct.
Yeah.
And even fewer of them, even if there is some kind of, like, donation available for it, very few is enough money to make the amount of hours that you're putting into it at all, like, you know, responsible in terms of a salary. And yet, the reason why I did it before, and the reason why I then did it again, and the reason why I know in the back of my head that at some point it's going to ring in my head again to be like, well, what if he did this, is because I know just how much joy it brings people.
Yeah, I mean, it could easily be said that's also part of why you and Kate and Liz's and Scoots signed up to every Sunday take your at-home tabletop games and you know, put them on a stream. It's part of why, like, you know, I imagine some of the joy that Kate gets out of figuring out all the amazing technology she can add to the stream is that she knows people who are viewing it will enjoy it as much as she does when there's the outcome. It's that, you know, there is a happiness that you can find knowing that you're facilitating other people's enjoyment, and that kind of, you get a splashback from that. But it's also exhausting sometimes, you know, even when I imagine, because it's kind of something that I'm fighting with right now, where I have an urgent desire to stream, but just not the energy to actually do what it takes to get the stream up and going. I imagine that you guys run into that as well, where you're just like, well, oh man, it's Sunday and all of us are ready to go. I guess we'll just, you know, I'll find the energy as it gets going. I'll feed off of the crowd as it gets going. So I know that we've experienced that in Pinky Pact with some players.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and it's I mean, even to address Osab's comment,
we know people that are staff on the servers that we play on, and we make it a point to tell them how good they're doing and be positive reinforcements for the efforts that they're doing. Because like we've said many times, it's a volunteer position. It's a thankless job. It really is. I mean, there are way fewer instances of people saying you guys are great, and most of the time those are people that are honestly just saying it so that they can suck up to staff. I'm gonna be really honest. But the people that know, and that's kind of when we step in and we go, look, we're friends, and I'm not gonna just blow smoke up your butt. I'm going to tell you, you're doing a great job, or this is really a cool thing. Or even if they don't do a good job, I'm going to say, hey, I think you probably could have done it this way. And they go, oh, yeah, actually, that's great feedback. Thank you so much. So we do try, and because we have been staff, we do try and uplift the ones that choose to do it, because we know how much of a beating it is. And we also, like one in particular, we've had a conversation with them because they were trying to decide whether or not they wanted to do staff, and we said, look, man, if you have your idea of a line of what you can give, what you want to invest in this, if you're cool with it, do it, because we trust you. And I think it would be a great opportunity for us to like try and be positive with the server. And so they ended up taking the position, and they have been a positivity and most things, but you could tell that it is draining at times, but they're mostly a positive person and realistic, especially. So I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, but
Requiem got something to
Yeah, but oh, go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
I was just telling Requiem to get something to drink.
Requiem, mentioning from my storyteller experience, it's so easy to find yourself forgetting that the game is supposed to be fun for you too. And that's easier when you have a smaller community to handle. In a tabletop role-playing game, you have, anywhere between only one other person to gigantic games. I still don't know how you have so many people in Pinky Pact. You somehow make it work. I couldn't do that. But that's still a small community. And that kind of community you can curate, first of all. You can kind of be like, I will play with these kinds of people, and I won't play with these kinds of people. And you can also deal with them and interact with them in such a way that you can kind of say, okay, well, you did something today that hurt my feelings or that pissed me off, but because we're a small group, I can talk to you and we can have a more effective dialogue than you're just some rando on the internet who, you're one of 200 people who are on this server regularly. And that person is like, well, I don't care, because if I don't get what I want, I can leave. I can just go somewhere else, because there are other servers. There aren't just one.
Right.
So the concept of also, if you're playing in a tight group, then it's also a lot harder for me as a player to try and play without considering the person on the other side.
Yes.
But if there's 200 people, you're not necessarily thinking of, well, I want to make sure that everybody's having a good time, including the staff.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Slight tangent again. I don't know if we're going to be able to come back all the way.
I'll
You
remember.
mentioned server size. And that's been a very interesting impact on the genre. Sticking again to like GTA roleplay, because that's the one that's advanced more. 5M, Red Dead roleplay is a couple of years behind because it came out later, so they're still working on the technology to bring it forward as much. But when GTA roleplay through 5M first became available, 32 people were the amount of people that could fit onto a map and therefore onto a server. And so when there were these stories being told At a maximum, at any point in time, there were 32 people to interact with. Not 32 characters altogether, because some people were online, some people were offline, and they would come on and back and forth and everything. But it was much, much smaller communities, and people were really fighting to get in because there was only 32 slots on the server. People would like wake up at 8 a.m. so that way they could get into the queue, and then hopefully by the time they got off of work at the end of the day, their queue would pop and they would have a chance to get onto the server in order to be one of those 32 people. But as a result of that, there were these like really involved storylines that, like, even if you weren't directly a character involved on the server, you heard about it or you knew about it. And I can think to, I'm not naming names, but there was this one character who was doing a super specific dark storyline as a serial killer on a particular server, and had been going through and successfully getting other characters to perma, so kill off their characters once he'd interacted with them. And because people were like, yeah, you know, there was kind of almost like a badge to be one of the victims of this particular character. And so when the person who was playing him was streaming, and there was this moment where he had interacted with somebody on the side of the road, and then you saw when they realized which character it was that they were acting and role-playing with, and how their demeanor immediately changed. There was clearly like fear for their character coming in, and it was like this really just like everybody that was watching or heard about it later or saw clips of it were just like, oh my god, that's so great. And then the servers started to get better, and then they had 64 players, then they had 128 players, and it just kept growing and growing. A server that we play on launched advertising the capacity to hold 600 players. And that's just so huge. But as a result of that, those huge, long, really in-depth story arcs are basically extinct. It's really just very much just like what's happening in this moment and what's important for your character, but you have no idea what's going on for a character that may spend most of their time on the other side of the map, and you just don't really hear about it unless they directly impact you and what you're doing. And so that story is kind of gone a bit, and it's I mourn it a little bit. I wish that we could have those big, huge stories, because we're people who come from tabletop roleplay games, and we like to have those big arcs and feel like the heroes, but we don't. Good night, Requiem.
Yeah, it's the evolution of the size, the population of the servers is very interesting to me, because I came into GTA when it was 128. Actually, it was kind of in between the 64 and 128. We ramped up to 128. And that was like mind blowing. Like, what? We're going to have 128 people. And now we laugh because we're regularly at like 300 plus. And you see a lot of players. Like, the technology has gotten to the point where before there were instances where you were all in one little spot and people would like kind of disappear because just like server issues. You just don't see them. You might hear them, but you don't see them. But now it's gotten to the point where like you see most of the people, and we've been in events where there's like 80 to 90 people all there at once, and it's incredible because you're like, you kind of pull back the view and just go, man, these are all just like people here in the moment. And that's again one of the positive outcomes. What did you say?
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. Like, we played on a server, and they had a summer music festival that was just jam-packed with people, and there were people performing their original music on stage for it.
Rapping,
and so
singing.
It was so cool, and so it's just like, this is amazing. This would never have been able to happen even 3 years ago, and now we get to experience this. So it's kind of a give and take, but it's just so crazy.
Yeah, and so to your earlier question, what's happened because of that population increase, the attention to your, or my role play isn't a requirement, a priority, or whatever you want to say to that person, because they want to be the hero of their story, the person that owns the spotlight. And a lot of it I attribute to is streamers, because Twitch is, obviously, we're on Twitch. Twitch is a huge thing. I'm going to be the first to admit, I thought Twitch was going to burn out about 4 years ago. I really did. I mean, not in 4 years or like 4 years ago, but I thought eventually it was going to burn out. And I was absolutely wrong. I had a friend that was just starting streaming, and I said, look, just have a plan B, but be careful. And now he's doing very well for himself as a streamer. And because of the boom, and I think COVID had a lot to do with it, because everyone's stuck at home, and what are we going to do but watch our soap operas and the Twitch streams on GTA Roleplay specifically. The idea of my roleplay must be content, and therefore I need to specifically concentrate on my story. The result is your story doesn't matter as much anymore, and that sucks, especially being that other person, because I don't stream. Gwen doesn't really stream, at least role play, and so we don't have the eyeballs and the power that comes behind it, with the viewers and the chatters and all of that to kind of encourage you to bring the content. And that's kind of where that's the evolution of the GTA specifically, even Red Dead. It's just the idea that we're all in this together, and let's play this story together. And now there could be literally 300 plus individual stories.
Yeah, you don't really get the main character energy. It's a lot of supporting character energy, but there's also freedom that goes along with that, especially if you're not a streamer, because there's a weird accountability that the audience will hold to their streamers, or to the people that the streamers interact with who are also streamers. That is just a whole kettle of fish that it's better not to get into, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Just because I know I would be overwhelmed by it. Even as I simultaneously participate as a viewer for some of my friends who do stream. But I also find that I get a lot more invested on my friends who play on servers that I don't play on, that I have no actual impact on, and they don't have any impact on me. Like, I can be as engaged in that soap opera as I want to be and not feel like it's ever gonna come back and bite me in the butt if I say something in somebody's chat and then it gets held against me later on.
Right.
While I'm playing my character or something. Yeah.
In playing these games, do you think that you've learned things about your real life, even though it's in an immersive sim?
What a question. Wow. Okay.
Did you learn? Have you learned how, look, one of the things that we do when we role play is we're experiencing things that we also expect to never be able to experience in our real lives. And that is true of games like GTA. You can be a cop. You can be a crime scene investigator. You can be a firefighter. And even though you know that you might never do that in real life, it gives you kind of a perspective on it. But it goes beyond that. There's role playing as well. The interactions that you have with other people. Do you feel like your time being somebody else has taught you how to be a better or different person in your actual life?
Yeah, you want to go first or me?
I have a two-part answer. Okay. I have personally, I think, experienced how this hobby has impacted my real life in a negative fashion, where it was not the factor, but it was a contributing factor to some mental health issues that I ultimately needed to get support on. and find a support structure around that's also like part of the reason I have the perspective that I have right now on the game.
Right.
But it was just something that kind of helped feed into that and increase it more and more. And then on the positive side, and because it's Glenn Powell Summer, I'm referencing his movie, The Hitman,
my boy.
which is a really good movie on Netflix, in my opinion. But they talk about towards the beginning that if you pretend enough to be something, you're not stuck in your personality. Your personality is not something that is sort of defined once you hit adulthood, but that the things that you encounter, if you engage in them enough, you can pull pieces into it and have a slide on what your personality type is like. And I do think that that's the case. Like, I think that the characters that I've been able to play really regularly have, like, I've taken pieces of them that I like and and stuck with them. I've gotten more confident because of some of the characters that I've played, and more trusting because of some of the characters that I've played, and more realistic because of some of the characters that I've played, and more willing to engage in goofy because of some of the characters that I've played. So yes, I think that it has had, for me personally, both pretty negative impact, and then in the wake of that, I can see places where it's also been positive.
Yeah, for me, it's sort of an unfair answer because I have been through therapy, and I'm going to credit that more and it coincides with like me doing the GTA roleplay and Red Dead roleplay and doing therapy. And so I'm going to credit the therapy more with how I've managed to change myself from before, and develop tools and ways that I can manage the world or navigate the world. But that's not to say that these roleplay experiences haven't had an impact or haven't had an influence in me changing for the better. I didn't actually mention this before. I was the player that would play on these servers for 12 plus hours a day when I first started it. Yeah, I didn't mention that. This
God.
Yeah, I know, right? I hit it. I buried the lead. Reveal. Yeah, you should have been waiting. Whoever's in chat, you got it. So, I know that life. That's kind of, I really should have said it. That's kind of why I kind of had a personal experience with this stuff, is because that part of my roleplay life or experience kind of shaped me into what I am now, where I am very quick to just say, you know what? I'm going to literally carve out 4 to 5 hours of server time and be good. And I still have time in between the time I have like to log off and to go to sleep. So, spend with Gwen, or let's go watch a episode of Discovery or whatever we're going to do. I think it's the overall experience, kind of like what you've just asked. Yes, I think it's allowed me to realize where my limits are as a person, how I need to interact with other people, but even the social aspect of it. I was very much like I've been told I'm pretty good at talking to people in real life, but I also say to them, well, I need the door to be open. I'm not good at just walking up to a group of people and being like, hey, so blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, no, I can't, that's not in me. But if like we're kind of in a forced interaction, or they may say something first, yeah, I'll just talk your ear off. But the role play has allowed me to let that be easier, to talk to people just straight up, cold calling, I guess if you want to call it. And so, yes, I think it's changed me. I mean, just like life experiences change you and how you're going to be in the future. Like, this is exactly the same
except this is just like not real life. What?
I really thought you were gonna quote Wicked there for a second.
Oh yeah, exactly. Because I knew you.
I was waiting for it. I have been changed
for
for
good. Yeah,
good.
it's kind of true though. Like I have been able to, and I think this is kind of getting super deep. Even since high school, I was the guy that everyone went to get their advice, or mainly to vent, because I don't think I was a threat in high school. But I would also I would remember. I have a good memory, and I would remember those, troubling stories, and I'd help my friends, and mostly girls, through all their problems with their boyfriend, and obviously secretly pine that they would realize that I've been standing in front of them the whole time. But this is not any different. All these role play experiences, the good and the bad, have allowed me to be way better at advising my friends when they experience the same bad. I can tap into, because it is all just a giant cycle of yep, seen that, could have told you that was going to happen, because it's just the same. And so yeah, it's kind of equipped me to be better at being a listener and better at being a helping hand when people need it, because as we've all said, I have a very good grasp on my mental state and corner in this, so I can easily help others if they need it or if they ask for it.
And yeah, to that extent also, for me, I've had conversations with friends who also share this hobby with us, that we're talking about and lamenting about real life work and stuff, and supervisors that are weird and just make the workday that much more difficult. And for one of them, our friends, I said, you know what, if that person treated you like that in game, you would pull out your 6-shooter, shoot them, and then ride off into the sunset. So why are you putting up with it? Here you have a response, that you don't like it, and you are willing to stand up for yourself there. And they're like, yeah. And I was just like, but also when you do that, you realize that after you've shot at them and you've rode off, you don't have to worry about them anymore. So at the end of the day, you also don't have to worry about them anymore. You just, put up with them the next day, and then you don't have to worry about them anymore. And they're like, yeah, that's true too. So I've also seen friends get more confident as a result of being able to test out
the hobby,
how they handle issues. And what they're and realizing, if they can set boundaries for this game, that they can also set boundaries in other aspects of their life, and that they've got some tools for that to try.
Yep.
Look, in the end here, this is an after dark clinic hours.
Oh, here we go. This is what I've been waiting for. Let's talk about,
This is a category of role playing where you can go on at any time, and you are another person. You've developed another person and another life. And so, do you find that the second person that you've created, this person who you get to embody, and not just for epic adventures, but also just to be a person, what parts of those do you find recurring in your characters that are and are not specifically like you?
Wow. Huh.
Well, that doesn't have anything to do with sexy time at all.
But I wanted to talk about sex.
Jeez.
I mean,
Yeah,
look,
okay.
sex is coming.
Oh, yeah, so to speak. If you're doing it right, you know what I'm saying?
Stop it.
But I like as an example,
Yeah.
when I
Uh-huh.
when I first started playing in these things when I was like a teenager, I would create characters that would be similar to what I would like an idealized version of myself. And then I realized later on that I am more likely to play characters that have elements of myself that are not me and I cannot be because I want to see what it's like to be something else.
Yeah.
For instance, I've played, not exclusively, but I've played a lot of female characters in these kind of immersive role-playing games because that's an element of my life that I cannot experience in real life.
Right.
But my characters also often have elements that I can see that are kind of standard to myself.
Right.
Like, for instance, a lot of my characters find an interest in other people who have a sense of humor.
Right.
So what do you find about your characters in that way? Because then it's going to dovetail into the topic that you were both so desperate to discuss earlier.
Okay. I have two things, and as soon as I say them, Splooie's gonna be like, "Oh yeah." So the thing that I pull into all of my characters is that I cannot separate myself from being a data analyst. So when we played a motorcycle gang, a club, we were into selling drugs, and like I made the most advanced series of spreadsheets in order to track all of our funds. We came up with code names for the different types of drugs that we were selling, and like it was, you could calculate out like what our profits were going to be for the week based on the type of work that people needed to do, and also how things were coming in with dues, and oh no, we had to take out a loan, but that's okay because I'm doing accounting for this club. I mean, it was just it was really goofy, but I'm doing it the same thing on my current character who's a cook. Like I've gone around, I've figured out all of the recipes on the server and what ingredients you need for them and where you can purchase the food at the best cost, so that way when we're doing our restaurant, we have the most cost-effective restaurant ever, and we're making the food so we can get like the cheapest food but the largest profit margins. And then also at the same time, I in GTA roleplay in particular, I cannot separate myself from my personal like sort of anti-capitalistic mindset on things. Like even if I intend to play a fairly non-political character, the second somebody says something that kind of like needles at that, like I will forever believe that I will forever believe that if the punishment for a crime is a fine, then that punishment or that crime is only really intended for poor people to be punished, and I just can't separate myself from that at all. So those are the things that I pull into every single character. I just can't seem to help it.
I think for my characters, problem solving is probably the number one. I like to be the person that people can come to and they feel comfortable coming to, or I can handle
talking about sex later.
I could also read a room really well and determine what the outcome can be based on just a few words in this interaction, and I kind of steer it to the outcome that we're as a group wanting. I'm specifically thinking of my biker character JJ.
He's really good at reading people.
I read people really well and situations, and so I kind of know how to speak to whoever is in front of me based on their tone and what words they're choosing and maybe even what emote they're using in game. And I kind of attack it, and not in a direct way, or direct but not in like an aggressive way, and I'm good at that in real life as well. a good vibe check, and I kind of write people off pretty quick. If you don't give me a good vibe, I'll give you a shot, a second chance. But boy, if I don't click, no, you're not worth the effort. And that's kind of the same in my characters, because I just don't want to waste my time, and and in turn, I don't want to waste yours, because we have to both be happy in this interaction. And if I'm not happy because you just ain't it, well, just let's move on. I'll give you the interaction in this moment, but after that, it's done. So those are kind of the things that I think have been similar to how I am. The things that are different, though,
My characters are way cooler than I am, actually.
super. I'm way more confident. Well, you know what? Kind of interestingly, JJ has evolved even from when I first started him. He was very much like me. He wasn't a biker. He was just a long haul trucker, driver. I kind of base all my characters out of Texas because it's just easier for me. You kind of go for where you know.
Yeah, I know how that feels.
And so it's just easy. And so I can reference this city because I know that city. But he was very much just me, and it transformed into this gruff, no nonsense, straight talking biker guy. I was a part of a club that was notorious on the server for various reasons, and became way more confident, and but never lost track of the relatable aspect of a human. He didn't get too over inflated ego or power hungry. It just wasn't him, and because that's not me. So I don't necessarily like to play completely different characters, although I guess my newest character, Laszlo, is kind of not me, very off the cuff.
Yeah.
But you kind of always, and we tend to see this in all players, you kind of regress to the mean of what you know, because it's comfortable and it's easy. And you don't want to be too complicated, because pretty quickly in this kind of role play, the story gets away from you. And then there goes that control or that enjoyment, when you don't have full grasp of your player and its story, or your character and your story.
And you also, to a certain extent, although you want to have a sense of a good, interesting personality for people to interact with, there's also the Keanu Reeves of it, where you have to be a little bit of a blank because you don't know where it's gonna, your original
Right.
character idea is never going to survive first impact with other people's character ideas. And so you need to be able to sort of flow with whatever it is that the story kind of takes you towards. The character that I played that first interacted with his character, JJ, ultimately ended up being secretary of a motorcycle club, when her highest aspirations were to just ultimately get an apartment and have a delivery job. That's what I started her out at, as kind of a blank, and then she just evolved up into this big thing where she ends up scared, yelling at scary bikers because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing for the club. And I wouldn't have predicted that when I first created her by any means. And the other part of it is, especially because you don't know what other people are going to be interacting with, when you're building your character, it's really awesome to have a backstory that you don't care that nobody ever finds out about it. On our Red Dead characters, my character, Elsie, is the sister-in-law of Splooie's character, and his brother / her husband was a total no-goodnik, a compulsive gambler, took all of the money that they had and lost it. And then she basically got targeted by his loan sharks and was sent on a mission to go and find him to bring him back so that he could pay back all this money. And then she arrived in the 5 states that are the setting to discover that he was dead. And Splooie's character is the one that shot him. And I, like, that never ever got to come out until, like, at the end we were just like, well, the story never got to be told, but, hey, Elsie, I shot my brother, sorry, kind of thing. And Elsie going, well, he was a bastard anyway, let's get married, kind of thing. Well, actually, she didn't say that, but she said.
What? Me.
But that's kind of the thing that happened is, like, we had this really cool backstory, we thought. And the only way even our really good friends on the server know about it is because we told them about it out of character, because it just never came up. It wasn't something that drove a story for anybody else on the server. And so
we don't want to force it either.
Yeah, it was just in the history.
Yeah. Some of the best stories are untold.
Mm-hmm.
But then let's tell this story.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
You have both played in these Sims. You have played in both Red Dead Redemption and Grand Theft Auto Sims.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever used these games in order to experiment or explore in a sexual context?
No. Well, not really. Okay, actually.
I see it going from no, and then gradually the goalpost is starting to shift.
It suddenly occurred to me. The last time that we played our biker characters, we were also playing with our friend who had played a character that his character JJ was very interested in before my character came on the scene. And it wasn't that my character like took him away. There was a gap in time, and she ended up being with somebody else. And so in the history of this character, he'd had romantic feelings for this other woman as well. And then he was just like, hey, to my character, you're kind of loosey-goosey, a little bit hippy-dippy. What do you think about bringing like a third into our relationship? And I was just like, well, what do I think about bringing a third into this relationship, and a third that's a female? Okay. And what it really relied on, because that's not something I am out of character super interested in, but I wasn't disinterested in doing the story of it. It relied on the 3 of us having a lot of out of character discussions about like what's going to be okay for this roleplay story to work out. Because it's all improv, we need to understand like what are the lines that are going to be there. Like we're not going to engage in what's referred to as ERP, erotic roleplay, for any of this. But, we might like refer to it having happened off screen kind of thing. Is that okay with everybody? That sort of thing. And so it was a lot of what I imagine is similar to initial conversations that actual people starting up getting into like a long-term threesome relationship or an open relationship might do if they're concerned about the happiness of everybody involved, is like really like having honest conversations about what it's going to be like, so that way there aren't any surprises. And ultimately it kind of just didn't end up working out. Like it wasn't something that was ultimately interesting to all 3 of us to role play, and so it ended, but it was there, and I would classify that under this experimental umbrella.
It's fun too. The she mentioned ERP or erotic roleplay, and it's strictly forbidden. I think I only know one server. Well, there are actually a lot of servers that allow some pretty outlandish things, and ERP is one of them. But for the most part,
effectively sexting, just so people kind of understand
being overtly
what's occurring.
Yeah, like a lot of one of the commands you could do is a /me, and then you kind of say what's happening with your character that you can't actually act out mechanically, and then it gets posted and seen to everybody around. And so that's kind of what's happening with erotic roleplay. is they're saying like what they're doing physically and all that kind of stuff. And so for the most part, all the popular servers have banned that. You can't do that on servers. But that's not to say that stuff doesn't happen off the server and in Discord mainly.
Well,
Yeah,
and also on server. We've been on multiple
Yes,
servers where there's
yes.
been a sudden staff announcement that says we
can
get
see
the chat logs. We have
can
to
see your
read
logs.
through those. We know what you've been doing. Please stop.
right.
That kind of roleplay isn't eligible. You're not allowed to do it, kind of thing.
Right.
I would also call out that like there's a joke version of a ERP, which is just emotional roleplay. It's
Yeah.
kind of sprung up for streamers who are playing characters that are in a relationship, and then they do like, you know, girlfriend stuff or girlfriend boyfriend stuff. Like, you know, Slash Me holds hands, and then everybody in the chat goes, "Ew."
Yeah. Kisses on cheek or something, and
Yeah.
and like you can obviously kiss, you know, if you're like, yeah, exactly, like, oh my god, but it's where the real sexy happens off server. I know of people that have done it. I might have engaged in time and time, but look, we gotta, you know, like it is a thing. Yeah, and obviously I was single at the time, and so was she, and so it's kind of a thing that it starts as a joke, but it's also kind of a, I don't know, interesting way of like playing with that aspect of things. But like Gwen said, you have like a line, you know, like you both agree to this interaction, but also like not letting it get to the point where like it becomes weird, as weird as that might sound too. But it's kind of with an expectation of this is just what it is, and you're not going to become like a weird stalker or be obsessed with this person now, because that's never happened with me personally. Now I do know of instances where that has happened because they allowed the ERP to happen and then it became an issue. But you know, that kind of goes back into that craving for that connection with someone. And it's super easy to do with relationship roleplay, especially when you don't have those clear boundaries or lines set in a conversation with that other person. Like, it can't just be an understood thing, because you don't know what that other person is thinking or feeling. And that's kind of what we did with each other, is had a conversation about it. And it probably helps that we're older and more mature about things, but yeah, that's how it's kind of worked for us. And like what you said with the throuple, I made it very clear, because this other person was my friend and I've known her longer than I've known Gwen, but I wanted to make it very clear to Gwen that I'm with you in real life. This other person, if you want to bring her in, it'd be fun. Oh yeah, is that a shock? You didn't what? Yeah, non-disclosure. Yeah, you guys are all in on it now. I know, chat. Don't freak out, Kate. I see you in there. So, the understanding was like, if we're gonna flirt, you do most of the flirting, and I'm telling you, Gwen got crazy with it. Like, I blushed, and she gives good flirt, and the other friend was happy with it. And it was fun. So yeah, you just have to know boundaries.
Full disclosure, Splooie, I am aware of eiragwen's capacity for flirt in the context of role playing.
Oh, all right. High five, my man. Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, no. She's good. She's good at flirt. Hey, I'm just saying, she jumped into my DMs first.
What are we
Don't
doing
deny it.
right now? What are we doing? All right. So I'm going to tell a story that's going to derail everything, but it's just because it's a very funny story to me. No names will be disclosed to protect the not very innocent. Ancient times, but also GTA roleplay. We had a couple that were on the server that were super insistent on ERP on the server. And they would it was a smaller server, and they would go off into like the middle of nowhere to like enact out these scenes. And we had a glitch on the server where all of the /me's were broadcast. So no matter where you were, if you entered something into the text portion of the GTA roleplay, everyone saw it. And so it was just kind of like chuckle things when somebody would go like /me smirks, and then everybody on the server knew somebody had smirked. And then they logged on and were not aware that this was an issue that was ongoing. And suddenly we were just like inundated with these sexting posts. We were just like, what's happening? And the admins were like flying around in invisible mode trying to find them to make them stop and get them off the server. It was really funny. I think it.
I like the concept. You mean like the mods were literally flying?
Yeah, you
get powers.
Go invisible.
See,
so
I wouldn't want them to go invisible. I would want to see like the equivalent of like Superman being like, my God, I hear people sexting, and that they have to burst through the air and people would be like, look, up in the sky, there's a couple of horny people on the server.
There was this one time on Red Dead. It was not sexting related. It was around a Halloween thing an event that we were running for people. And the invisible thing that admins could do was not 100% working, and so Splooie thought he was invisible flying around the server to check on people, and then all of a sudden in our like clips and pics thing, somebody posted like there was a flying man in the sky.
The guy just hovering over the water staring at me, and I'm like, oh no.
It was just Splooie's cowboy up there. It was very funny. Yeah. Oh, admin powers.
Yeah.
I do miss those sometimes.
It's happening again.
No. It's not worth it, but there were some fun things that you could do.
Yeah.
Is there anything in our last minute that we have that you want to shout out to the people who are listening to this about these kinds of servers? Because you've done a lot of talking about how they're great and a lot of talking about how they are awful. What's the one thing that you're hoping that people come away with when they've listened to this?
If you're at all interested in it, either as a player or as a viewer, it's very accessible on Twitch to be a viewer. Like actively think of the limits that you want to have. So if you decide to apply and get onto a server, know in advance like how much time you can actually contribute to that, and then set alarms for yourself. And when you set up a rhythm, the people that you play with will also recognize like, oh, it's time for so and so to turn into a pumpkin, so let's get all of the stuff we need to talk to about them before they go, and then they're gonna go, kind of thing. People will figure that out and respect those things as long as you sort of hold to them. And then if you're a viewer, pick out your favorite characters, but don't get overly invested, because it's not gonna be a realistic story. Sometimes it'll just be the weirdest thing you're just like, oh, that's what happened? Okay, I guess, I'm still gonna root for you, but it's so weird that you just lost in that absolutely bizarre way, or whatnot. And just kind of embrace the ridiculousness of it.
Yeah, I think what we've developed into as a video game community, or just a game community, is to experience something that's like a play experience. You go to Twitch and you kind of look around and see how other people are interacting or enjoying it before you go and make that $70 purchase or whatever it is. But with this specific thing, with roleplay, I would suggest going to Twitch, but I would start... Yes, that's exactly right. I would start with the lesser viewed streams. Go to the people that are streaming to 5 people maximum, because they're doing the mundane.
There are very rare instances that you'll find one of those streams where they're just out of control and bonkers over the top. There might be, and they just haven't been discovered yet. But I think if you start there and work your way up to the people that are streaming to 50 people and then a couple hundred, and then you see the big streamers, you will understand the variation of role play that's being presented on any particular server or just in general, because each server is influenced by the other. It really is true. They all are on different server boxes and interact with different player bases, but at the same time there's say again?
Different staff.
Yeah, different staff and different genre or different direction that they're taking it in. But for the most part, the same kinds of role play are happening on each server. And so I would work your way from the bottom up and you'll get a good idea of what kind of role play you might expect. And like Gwen said, have an idea as to where you could hit the ripcord and pull out of it if you think you need to. But I'm honestly like, give it a shot. Like if you want to try something different and you're kind of interested in what you see, there's very much a way that you can carve out a small chunk of the server and never be affected with the bigger bullshit that you might see on streams. It's absolutely possible. And you know, it may be a struggle if you're by yourself, but if you have kind of a social bug about you, you're going to be able to make friends pretty dang quick. And I don't know, maybe you'll grab a good group of friends that you can make some good memories with. Just be careful, like with anything.
Careful, like with anything, is kind of going to have to be one of the hallmarks of just straight up, let's be safe. Right? Well, thanks to both of you for coming and talking about an area of gaming that's different and yet still definitely within the wheelhouse of what we discuss here. Where can we find you?
I mean, Pinky Packed. Yeah, Pinky Packed is where we play D&D every Wednesday. What's is it 8:30 Eastern?
Correct.
Yep, I play.
We play for 3 hours.
Yeah, I play a paladin named Kaladin. Wink. Yeah, we play for about 3 hours. Other than that, you'll find, well, actually, none of our friends really stream. Yeah, that's kind of it.
Not outside of it, yeah. But I do plan on streaming once I'm down in Texas. I've got to get to these French rat siblings part 2, because that's just been like, shaking in my Steam saying, play me, and I don't want to take the story away from those who watch me play the first one. And that'll just be on my eiragwen Twitch.
Well, thanks to you both. And honestly, it is worth it to check these people out. They do some really cool stuff, and it is always worth a look to see if that's the sort of thing that you might be interested in seeing. For now, though, I am just going to make sure that everybody is aware that even if you're playing in the middle of Grand Theft Auto or Red Dead Redemption, and things aren't necessarily going the way that you have, and even if the rules of the server say that you shouldn't, one of the best things that you can do in order to make sure that you're having the best experience that you can is to use your word hole. I'll see you next time.